We, the car enthusiasts, have suffered yet another loss just recently, and unfortunately, we have lost the Camaro. Again. And you're probably thinking, why are you, of all people, upset at the Camaro? You drive a freaking Mustang. All you've had is Fords. Minus the Fiero, but yeah, that is true. And there's a big reason why I'm upset that the Camaro is leaving. And not even just to mention that who knows what's going to happen to the Challenger and Charger in the next couple of years, but that has yet to be seen. We know what's happening now with the Camaro. And sadly, the Camaro is not being produced past 2024. Like, that is the final year you will get a Camaro. This is why I am really upset and I am really concerned about what this means for other cars that we have today. So let's talk about it.
Let's have some fun on Karz Created.
Ford Mustang, the longest continued produced sports car ever. It is the quintessential American sports car or muscle car. I think it's a sports car. It used to be a pony car. There was a time that could have been a muscle car, but it's definitely a sports car. Because of the Mustang success, of course, a lot of companies had to find their way to compete with Ford's success. And well, Chevy did that with the Camaro. There not long after Ford came out with the Mustang, Chevy had to get a piece of the pony car race, and they came out with their own, the Camaro. And the Camaro was a hit too when it first came out. You know, just the type of car that the Mustang Camaro was really popular. It was basically a recipe for an awesome car. Instead of these big, gigantic muscle cars of the time, you know, just long cars, big blocks, or even just, you know, high winding small block V8s, you had a reasonably sized coupe with a reasonably sized and powerful engine. So it was a bit different than what was usually offered at the time. So they were huge, especially with the enthusiast. And the Camaro did well all the way up until the early 2000s. And some could argue that the Terminator Cobra Mustang was the one that put the final nail in the coffin for the 4th gen Camaro. And that very well could be, but the 4th gen Camaro was still a good car. The SS with the LS1, it was a good car. You had to be careful which of those you ran into on the streets back in the day. I mean, long tube headers, full exhaust, rear gear, and a hit of nitrous, and you have a car that is a force to be reckoned with, that you could still drive every day. And until Ford really came out with the Terminator Cobra, there wasn't really anything that could compete, especially modified for modified, against the LS1 SS 4th gen Camaro. It was just a good car. And then Ford had the answer. And the rest is history as far as that's concerned. The Terminator Cobra was on the tail end of the New Edge Mustang, which was still a continuation of the SN95 chassis. And right after that, they introduced the S197 chassis. And at this point in time, there was no Camaro to compete with the Mustang. Actually, the only other car that GM had to compete with the Mustang was the GTO. And the only reason he had the GTO that they could have used is because it's just a rebadged Holden that they used in Australia. They just did a couple of their crash tests. It was so much cheaper just to convert the Australian car for American use than it was to redevelop a whole new car. So that's all they did, and that was the only thing they had. And then you came with the Pontiac G8. Basically, Pontiac picked up where Chevy left off. And they made these cars to compete with the Mustang, because until then, there was nothing. And during the same times that the GTO and the G8 GT came out, obviously they were a hell of a lot more car than your normal Mustang GT was. So what then happened? Ford had to come back out with the same recipe they did that put the 4th gen Camaro out of business, and that was supercharged V8 Mustang. And that's what they did. Came the 2007 GT500, and that car changed a lot for a lot of people. Ultimately probably also killed off the GTO and the G8 GT. Once the GT500 came back in 2007, it did excellent for 2008, 9. Then, you know, in 2010, the Mustang got a body refresh. But also in 2010, the Mustang got its primary competitor back on the market, the 5th gen Camaro. So Chevy's like, you know what? We're not using the GTO anymore. We tried rebadging our G8 GT to a Chevy SS and it hasn't done well. We need to come out with another two-door, front-engine, rear-wheel drive V8 sports car to compete with the Mustang. We have nothing. We have to make this from scratch now. What do? I'm sure someone in the board meeting was like, why don't we just bring back the Camaro? And everyone just probably is. And after a moment of silence, you probably heard some clapping because that was probably the best idea they could have had. And when the 5th gen Camaro came out, boy, did the Mustang had a run for its money again. Because at that time, LS1 had evolved to the awesome LS3. And the LS3 was a really good engine. Once again, full bolt-on, you had a lot of power for a little bit being put in. So it was really testing the Mustang at the time. And really the only Mustang that could have outpaced a 2010 SS was the GT500. Everything else, the SS was faster than your normal GT Mustang, your special editions, maybe unless you bought like a Celine or something and they had a supercharger, but even then sometimes was not enough to outrun a full bolt-on Camaro SS. So here again, we have a problem. So what did Ford do? Obviously in 2011, Ford came out with the Coyote 5-liter. That 5-liter had to have been in production for many years before it was released. It just didn't happen overnight. So it just so happens that that's how it worked out. But Ford knew that the 4.6 was not going to cut it. So that's when they started developing the successor to the 4.6, the next evolution of the Ford modular family, and that was the Coyote. When the Coyote V8 came out in 2011, that changed a lot again for the Ford Mustang. So then once Ford really had some muscle back under the hood of the Mustang, then Chevy responded with even more muscle in the Camaro. So what happens then? Well, then you get the Camaro coming out with all kinds of crazy things like, oh, I don't know, the freaking 427 Z28. I mean, if you thought the SS wasn't enough, Chevy made sure they had something to take care of that Coyote V8. And oh, they did. They basically took their 7-liter Z06 V8 and stuffed it in the Camaro, gave some sticky ass tires, big brakes, aggressively tuned suspension. Then they had one of the most aggressive, street legal, track-oriented cars that existed. And once again, when that came out, the only thing that was able to keep up with it was a GT500. But really, the GT500 wasn't nearly capable as the Z28 around turns. The GT500 could have kept up with it in the straight line. That wasn't a problem, but around a track, when you're going turns, nothing could have kept up with that Z28. So then, once again, Ford had a problem. After that, the S197 chassis was finally retired in favor of what we have now, the S550, of course, until the S650 comes out. But the S550 is probably one of the best Mustang chassis ever made. And guess what? This is a direct response to the 5th gen Camaro. And if you don't believe me, what's one of the biggest things the 5th gen Camaro had over the S197 Mustang? Independent rear suspension. Yeah, every other sports car ever made other than the Mustang in modern era used an IRS. And even a lot of other Ford cars used an IRS except the Mustang. The Mustang kept the solid rear axle for the longest time up until the S550. And I think the Camaro is the thing for that. The Camaro is the thing for what we have now in terms of the Mustang evolution. Because without the Camaro, I don't think we would have gotten an IRS. Maybe we would have, maybe we wouldn't have. I can tell you with confidence, without the Camaro, we would have never have gotten one of my favorite modern Mustangs of all time, the GT350. And I can tell you that with confidence. If it wasn't for that Z28 Camaro, we would have never have gotten a GT350. And for me, that is one of my favorite Mustangs of all time. And if we continue with this back and forth, and with the success of the ZL1 then prompted Ford to build one of the most ridiculous Mustangs ever created, and that is, of course, the S550 GT500. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah, I know, I get it. Don't have a manual, but it has a dual clutch transmission. When did you ever think a Mustang would have a dual clutch transmission? And not just any dual clutch, a pretty good dual clutch. And the new GT500 is just an animal of a car. All thanks to the Camaro. If you haven't picked up on it so far, That is exactly why I'm sad to see the Camaro leave, because if it wasn't for the Camaro, I don't think we would have gotten any of the crazy Mustangs that we have today. It's possible we could have gotten maybe something here or something there, just because, you know, there's a market that is demanding for it, but nothing is better for business than competition, and that's exactly what happened. So my fear is once the Camaro is gone and lost again, and there's going to be very little competition left for the Mustang, at least in the domestic side, the American side of the car market, other than what remains to be seen happening to the Challenger and Charger. There's nothing left to compete with the Mustang. So we know Ford's probably going to come out with another GT500 or something like it. But after that, then what? Are they really going to strive to keep pushing the Mustang to be a better and better car without the competition of one of the most competitive car the Mustang ever had, the Camaro? With the Camaro's absence, will the Mustang continue to evolve? That is exactly what I'm afraid of. But let me know what you think is going to happen as the Camaro goes away, as we likely lose the Challenger and Charger over the next few years. What do you think is going to happen with the Mustang? You think Ford's going to continue making an awesome car and developing and going above and beyond what they would have done anyway? Or think they're just going to lay back and what it is what it is? We like it, and we don't, because guess what? There's no other car we can buy. So it's not like we can take our business elsewhere, right? Let me know what you think in the comments. And that's going to wrap it up here for this video. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, share with everyone you know. You want to see more content like this and you haven't already, go ahead, subscribe to the channel. Keep a lookout for next car enthusiast video.